The tip of that crimson writing brush hovered over the clan registry scroll, deep within the family's ancestral hall. That was the exact split second I clawed my way back from the land of the dead. Thick, cloying incense hung heavy in the air. The elderly clan elder's gravelly, ancient voice rumbled across the silent room. He spoke aloud the name. Lin Mei-su, officially recognized second daughter of the noble house of Yongning. I stood pressed all the way to the back of the assembled crowd. My own birth father held the brush in his grasp, carving Mei-su's name straight into our household's official bloodline record. One by one, the fingertips of my hands turned ice cold. I had lived through this exact moment once before, in my past life. Every single detail lined up perfectly. This was the day the false daughter got her formal place within our family. For 16 long years, Mei-su had lived beneath our marquee household's roof. She'd worn my given name. She'd occupied my private courtyard. For 16 years, she'd called my birth parents mother and father. And now, at last, they were granting her legitimate status within our clan. Father stood before every single clansman gathered there. He told the room Mei-su shared none of our family's blood. Even so, he argued, she had been raised under this household's care. It would be cruel to cast her out with nothing to her name. My oldest brother stepped forward. He kept emphasizing how frail Mei-su's body was. She could never bear the public shame of being turned away, he insisted. My second brother chimed in next. This was just a tragic infant swap at birth, he reasoned. Mei-su had never done me any real harm. But then my third brother moved to plant himself directly in front of her. He turned his gaze fully toward me, his tone sharp. You have returned home at last, Lin Xiang, he said. Why must you drive Mei-su straight over the edge? I could still feel the ghosts of my old pain rise up. In my previous life, I had dropped to my knees right on that ancestral hall stone floor. I had wept through the entire night, utterly confused. I was the one stolen away 16 years prior. I was the girl who'd grown up freezing and starving out in the countryside. My adoptive father had sold me off to settle his gambling debts. I'd barely escaped death before I finally found my way back to the Marquis estate. So why did every single member of my birth family act like my homecoming was some grand gift I ought to bow my head and thank them for? If I dared to crave my father's affection, or my brother's protection, if I wanted back the courtyard and the inheritance my birth mother had left behind, all of a sudden I became greedy, unreasonable beyond all measure. Back then, I surrendered piece by piece. I handed over Tingsu Courtyard, the private residence my mother had meant for me, to Mei-su. I gave up my own coming-of-age ceremony. I split the profits from my maternal grandfather's shops evenly with her. I even allowed her input on the imperial betrothal offer meant for the Marquis household's true legitimate daughter. I yielded all of this because my father had gently persuaded me to. I clung to a foolish hope. If I was just a little more understanding, a little more compliant, surely they would finally see my worth. 5 years later, I rotted inside the Ministry of Justice's dungeon. The charge laid against me was colluding with foreign northern barbarians. Letters supposedly written by me to our enemies had turned up inside my quarters. My most trusted personal maid stood as the key witness. My own fiancé, Lu Jinghang, had handed over all the so-called proof, and kneeling on the stone before the emperor, begging for harsh justice to be delivered against me, were none other than my father and my 3 brothers. Mei-su showed up at my cell bars. She wore the ceremonial robes of a commandery princess, robes that should have belonged to me. A sweet, cold smile played across her lips as she spoke through the iron bars that she admitted she herself had planted those treasonous letters. My maid had been bought off long beforehand. Lu Jinghang's heart had always belonged to her. And then she dropped the words that still haunted my dreams. You still cannot understand, can you? They know you are innocent. They simply chose the good of the household over you. The next dawn, I was ordered to drink poisoned wine. Only one person came to see me before my life slipped away. That was Prince Jing Xiao Qinyang, the man I had always kept carefully at arm's length. That he had burst through the Ministry of Justice gates wielding his military seal, desperate to save me. But he arrived far too late. I lay helpless in his arms, blood flooding my mouth. For the very first time, I saw that cold, unyielding royal prince's eyes burn bright red with grief. That he asked me, voice cracking, Xiang, why would you never place even a sliver of your trust in me? By then I could no longer form words. I only remember how tightly his fingers wrapped around my dying hand, that was the memory that shattered as my eyes flew open. I was right back in that ancestral hall, on the exact day Meisu's name was being written into our clan records. The clan elder closed the heavy registry book shut. My father, Lin Chongshan, turned his face toward me. His voice carried that soft, rare gentleness I recalled so clearly from my past life. Meisu's entry into our clan rolls is settled, he told me. You remain this household's true legitimate daughter. She will never outrank you. From this day onward, the two of you ought to get along as sisters. Do not let the circumstances of your births drive a wedge between you. I held my gaze steady on him, and then I smiled that in my former life, I had heard those exact same sentences. I had knelt down and pressed him with a question. If I truly was his biological daughter, then what was Meisu right away? My father's face had darkened. All three of my brothers had rushed to defend Meisu. Somehow, the whole messy reunion had twisted around until every bit of blame landed squarely on my shoulders. That this time, I would not waste breath bickering over every phrase. I simply bowed my head toward the clan elder. If her name is already inscribed, I said calmly, then so be it. Every soul inside that shrine froze. Even Meisu, whose features were always so carefully composed, flickered with visible confusion. My father frowned deeply. You hold no objections? He pressed. I do not, I answered, my tone perfectly leveled. That oldest brother Lin Yanji studied me for a long moment, like he could not believe what he was hearing. Xiang, he said carefully. If this upsets you, you may speak your mind. There is no need for bitter sarcasm. I almost laughed out loud right then. I saw the trap crystal clear. If I wept and raged, I was unreasonable. If I kept my composure, I was being passive-aggressive. No matter what I chose to do, whenever Meisu shed even a single tear, I would automatically become the villain. I was finished playing their cruel game. That I lifted my chin and directed my words straight to my father. Since Meisu has formally joined our clan registry, she holds the status of this household's young lady. If that is so, should Tingsu courtyard not be reassigned? Meisu's complexion drained of all color. When I first returned to the Marquis estate, father had ordered her to move out of that courtyard. But after my mother passed away, Meisu had continued living there. She had sobbed over being forced to leave. Each of my three brothers had taken turns badgering me to give way. In the end, I had agreed to settle for a lesser side courtyard. That everyone in the room expected me to dig up old grievances. Second brother Lin Lingu cut in immediately, his tone hard. She has lived within Tingsu courtyard for 16 years. You have only just returned a few short months. There is no call for this. You misunderstand me. I broke in. I went on, letting every word land clearly in the hush of the hall. I have no intention of moving into Tingsu. More than that, I will not stay on the Marquis estate at all. I am moving out tonight. Complete silence crashed over the ancestral hall. At long last, my father's expression shifted from calm to shocked. What did you just say? Third brother Lin Yanzi was the first to let out a mocking sneer. Lin Xiang, what dramatic stunt are you attempting to pull? If you are angry about Meisu's registry entry, just say so. Do not threaten to run away from home to manipulate us. I looked straight at him. I remembered this man all too well. In my past life, when soldiers dragged me off to prison, he had kicked the back of my knees, forcing me to collapse and confess to crimes I never committed. He had spat that the household had raised me for years, and this was how I repaid their kindness. The bitter irony burned. I had only resided in that estate for 3 years. The girl they had nurtured for 16 whole years was Meisud. I am not running away, I told him slowly. Before my mother died, she left a private residence for me on Vermilion Bamboo Street. That property belongs solely to me. I intend to move into my own home. Father's gaze darkened further. That house has sat abandoned for many years. No one could possibly live there. Servants can clean it up. I replied. What wrong has this household done you? He demanded. That question gave me a short pause. That if this had been my previous life, I would have dissolved into tears. I would have listed every single hurt one after another. I would tell him how, on my very first day back, Meisu feared losing her status and could not sleep. So father had ordered me to comfort her. I would tell him about the jewelry oldest brother had picked for me, a trinket he himself had not wanted. I would recount how second brother was teaching me horse riding, but the second Mesu complained of dizziness. He abandoned me all alone out on the riding grounds. Third brother's offenses stung worst of all. Once, Mesu had fallen into a pond. Even knowing I could not swim, he shoved me straight into that cold water, forcing me to rescue her. I burned with fever for 3 days afterward. When I woke, all he had to say was that I had grown up in the countryside, and had grown far too delicate that I had poured out all these grievances once. And nobody had remembered a single one. So this time, I gave a simple answer. I am not being mistreated. I simply do not feel at home living beneath this roof. With those words, I turned and walked out of the ancestral shrine. Mesu hurried after me at once. Her voice came soft, trembling. Sister, is this because of me? If you do not wish for my name to be on the registry, I can beg father to erase it. Third brother stepped squarely in front of her, shielding her from me. Mesu, why are you begging her? I kept walking forward. Behind my back, my father's voice cracked like a cracking whip. Lin Xiang. I halted in my tracks. This is an ancestral ceremony, he boomed. Where exactly do you think you are going? I turned my head to glance back at him. Back to my quarters. I must pack my belongings. Father's chest heaved with anger. I forbid you to leave this estate. In that moment, the whole situation felt utterly absurd. All those years in my past life, they had pressed me constantly to be reasonable, to yield, to stop competing with Mesu. Now I wanted absolutely nothing from them, and still they would not grant me permission to go. I lifted my eyes toward the rows of ancestral memorial tablets high upon the altar. Father, today you made the choice to write a person without our bloodline into our clan registry. You ought to understand this truth. A clan scroll only determines what surname you carry. It cannot dictate where you are forced to live. I am 17 years old. I am no small child. The house my mother left is mine by right. Moving into my own private property breaks no single law of the Great Yong Empire. For a heartbeat, my father could find no reply. I did not spare them another glance. I left the ancestral hall and headed straight for my courtyard. My personal maid, Qing Dai, was out in the yard laying medicinal herbs out in the warm sunlight. When she saw me return so early, she rushed over, alarm written all over her face. Miss, why have you come back so soon? Gather all our things. We are packing. I instructed her. Qing Dai froze solid. Looking at her young face, a sharp, needle-like ache pricked deep inside my chest. I recalled what had happened 3 months after my return in my former lifetime. Qing Dai had fallen down a well and drowned. Everyone had called it a terrible accident. Later I learned she had stumbled onto secrets she was never meant to uncover on the night she died. I had not even gotten to bid her a final goodbye. The whole household had been busy preparing for my wedding. That loss remained one of my deepest, sharpest regrets. Miss, Qing Dai whispered, drawing me back to the present. I lifted my hand and gently patted the top of her head. Do not call me the estate's young lady any longer. We are leaving this place. Qing Dai's eyes flew wide open. Leaving? Where are we going? Vermilion Bamboo Street. The residence the late madam, my mother, left behind. Her lips parted, and she spoke cautiously. Has the Marquis given his consent for this? He has not. I told her. Qing Dai stared at me in shock. A small smile tugged at my mouth. Which means we need to hurry. I had learned a brutal lesson in my past life. Some doors do not require another person's permission for you to step through. If the door was never locked to begin with. For so long, I had knelt there, waiting for someone else to nod their approval. I told Qing Dai to pack only items that truly belonged to me. My clothing, my personal jewelry, the handwritten letters my mother had left behind, the stack of books I had bought for myself after coming home. I would not take a single gift the Marquis household had given me. Qing Dai watched me set an ornate ruby hairpin back inside its decorative box. She could not hold back her question. The Marquis gifted you this pin for your birthday, the very first year you returned home. I glanced at the ornament, and I made no move to pick it up. He purchased 2 of these. The other one, larger and more splendid, went straight to Mesu. Qingdai bowed her head and asked no further questions. That dusk painted the sky by the time we finished packing. 2 carriages waited by the estate's side gate. I chose not to depart through the grand main entrance. Not out of fear. I simply could not bear to look upon any of their faces one more time. Just as we reached that side gate, third brother Lin Yanzi blocked our path. A dozen household guards stood behind him. "Carry all those trunks back inside," he ordered, his face twisted with ugly rage. I gestured for Qingdai to stop where she stood. "Step aside," I said. "Father's orders," he bit out. "You will not set foot off this property today." "Those are his commands, not mine," I answered. Lin Yanzi let out a bitter, angry laugh. "You think so highly of yourself now, Lin Xiang. How long do you imagine you will survive out in the world without this household's protection? That Vermilion Bamboo Street house has sat abandoned for more than 10 years. There are not even proper servants on site. You suffered so terribly out in the countryside. At last you have come back to the Marquis estate. Fine, throw your little tantrum for a day or two. But once you walk through that gate, do not expect to come crawling back begging for shelter." If this had been 3 years prior, those words would have terrified me. When I was first recognized as their blood kin, I truly believed this Marquis mansion was my only home. I ached so badly for a real family. Even when that family brought me nothing but misery, I could not bring myself to walk away. But death had reshaped every part of my thinking. A place where no one treasures you is never a home. It is a cage. And to stay inside that cage, you are forced to keep paying a steep price. That I met Lin Yanzi's eyes. "Do not worry, third brother. I will never beg to return." The mocking look on his face wavered for a split second. That I began to walk forward. The guards were unwilling to lay physical hands upon me. Instinctively, they shifted to make space. But Lin Yanzi lunged forward. His fingers clamped tight around my wrist. "You are not leaving," he snarled. Qingdai's face drained of color with fright. I did not struggle against his grip. I simply stared down at the hand wrapped around my arm. "Third brother, you had better release me. Otherwise, first thing tomorrow morning, a formal complaint will land on the Jingzhou Prefecture magistrate's desk." "We are siblings," he snapped. "What on earth would you accuse me of?" "Unlawful detention of my personal belongings and obstructing the free movement of a law-abiding woman," I replied. Lin Yanzi froze in place. "Have you lost your wits? Every house, shop, and landed estate my mother left behind is fully registered with imperial authorities. Every item inside these carriages comes with a detailed written inventory. Should this household attempt to seize any of these things by force, I will go straight to the prefect's court. We will find out whether a marquis's manor stands above the laws of Great Yong." Lin Yanzi's face flushed bright red with fury. "You would wield imperial law against your own kin?" "I am not using law against you. I am merely reminding you of what it states." At that exact moment, oldest brother Lin Yanji arrived. He still wore his official court robes, fresh from his work at the judicial temple. He took in the whole scene unfolding by the side gate, and his brows drew tight together. "Yanzi, let her go," he ordered. Reluctantly, Lin Yanzi loosened his grip on my wrist. Oldest brother stepped toward me. "Father sent me to bring you back inside," he said. "I am not out for a casual stroll. I am moving residence." I told him plainly. "I understand," he answered. He glanced over the trunks loaded onto the carriage, and fell quiet for a moment. "At the very least, wait until tomorrow." "Why?" "Meisu was only added to our family registry today. If you move out of the manor this very night, word will spread. What will society whisper about her?" I looked directly at him. So that was what truly mattered. He felt no concern for my safety traveling after dark. He gave no thought to whether the Vermilion Bamboo Street house was fit for human habitation. His sole worry was Meisu's public reputation. In my past life, I had never seen this truth. I had always told myself my oldest brother was serious-minded, quiet by nature, poor with words. Looking back now, it was never that he lacked the skill to speak gently. He reserved all his softness for that other girl. "Oldest brother," I said quietly, "do you ever care what gossip circulates about me?" He hesitated, unable to give an answer. I spoke for him. "You do not." 3 months ago, Meisu wept at the eldest princess's banquet. She claimed that ever since I returned home, she lived in constant fear. The very next day, rumors raced through the capital, painting me as cruel and intolerant toward my adopted sister. Second brother publicly scolded people spreading gossip. Yet he never once denied those lies were true. Half a year ago, at a flower viewing gathering, Meisu tripped and shattered the jade bracelet grandmother had gifted to me. Everyone claimed I flew into a rage and forced her to kneel all night. In reality, I never spoke a single word of rebuke to her. You serve at the judicial temple, I continued. More than most, you know all cases must stand on hard evidence. Yet you never once launched an investigation into the slander spoken about me. His expression shifted slowly. I said nothing further. I was not trying to make him feel guilty. I was only reinforcing a lesson for myself. Stop holding out hope. Please step aside. I told him, but he stood motionless for a long stretch of time. At last, he moved out of my path. Lin Yanzi stared in utter disbelief. Oldest brother, you are letting her leave? I walked through the side gate of the Marquis estate. Night wind swept across my skin. Qingdai hurried close behind me, clutching a bundled pile of our belongings. She whispered softly, Miss, are you sad? I tilted my face upward toward the sky. The moon shone bright and cleared. No, I said that it was a lie. The instant I passed through that gate, something deep inside my chest ached. Behind those high walls lived my birth father and my 3 brothers, the people I had spent 16 years longing to find. Still, this pain paled in comparison to the agony of drinking poisoned wine inside a prison cell in my former existence. I climbed up into the carriage. Let us depart. I told the driver that the carriage wheels began to roll. Vermilion Bamboo Street lay on the city's western side, not terribly far from the Marquis compound. My mother's old house was called Chioju Manor. I had only visited it one single time long ago. Back then, father had told me it was improper for an unmarried young lady to live alone outside the family estate. I had never returned after that. Now, as I pushed open its front wooden doors, dust hung thick in every room. Yet the place was not as desolate as I had feared. A woman with streaks of gray threaded through her hair waited right at the entrance. The second she caught sight of me, her eyes welled over. Young miss. I recognized her at once. She was Aunt Ju, my mother's senior personal dowry matron. After my mother's death, she had left the Marquis Manor, claiming she would retire to her hometown. In my past life, I had always assumed she had long departed the capital entirely. Aunt Ju. I greeted her. She sank down to her knees. This old servant has waited for you for 17 years. Those words froze me completely. She pulled a metal key out from inside her clothing. Before the madam passed away, she gave this to me. She instructed me, if one day her true daughter should ever come back, I must hand over this house and everything contained within it. My heart lurched hard inside my ribs. My mother had known I was still alive. Tears pooled in Aunt Ju's eyes. The madam never once believed you had perished. My fingers clenched tight. In my past life, Meisu had told me I had been swapped by a wet nurse shortly after birth, that everything was a terrible accident, and the household had only uncovered the truth 16 years later. But Aunt Ju's words painted a completely different picture. Aunt Ju, let us speak inside. I said that night, I learned for the first time that my mother's death might not have been the simple illness everyone had described. Aunt Ju laid out the full story. 3 days following my birth, I had vanished. The Marquis household told outsiders a wet nurse had mixed up the 2 infants. But my mother had spotted something wrong. The baby brought back to her carried a jade lock she had never laid eyes on before. The wet nurse insisted some unknown outsider had gifted it. My mother quietly investigated for 2 full years. She discovered that same wet nurse had maintained secret contact with concubine Lu, the biological aunt of Meisu herself. Chills ran the full length of my body. Meisu had not been swapped by random misfortune. She had been deliberately planted inside the Marquis household. Aunt Ju nodded gravely. Shortly after the madam uncovered this plot, she suddenly fell gravely ill. 3 months afterward she was gone. Before she died, she entrusted all of these assets to me. She ordered me never to go back to the Marquis Manor, and never to seek out the Marquis. My throat grew rough and hoarse. Why would she not go directly to my father? Aunt Ju stayed silent for a very long while. The madam said she could never be certain whether the Marquis already knew what was unfolding. I sat beneath lamplight, lost in silence for hours. In my past life, right up until my final breath in that dungeon, I had thought my greatest enemies were Mei Su and Lu Jinghang. Now I understood that long before all of that, unseen hands had already derailed the whole course of my life. Aunt Ju guided me toward a back courtyard study that had remained locked shut for 17 years. 6 large wooden trunks sat inside that room. The first trunk stored my mother's dowry account ledgers. The second held land deeds. The third contained title documents for 12 shops scattered all across the capital. The fourth stored 3 tea mountain properties located in the southern Jiangnan region. The fifth trunk was stacked high with old letters. The sixth box held nothing but a purple sandalwood lockbox. Where is its key? I asked. The madam never left one behind. Aunt Ju replied that I studied the box's lock. Its mechanism was strange, unlike ordinary brass locks. Then a fragment of memory surfaced. In my past life, moments before I died from poison, Xiao Qinyang had pressed a small silver key into my palm. I had already lost all my strength, so I never got to ask what purpose it served. He had only whispered one sentence into my ear. This belonged to your mother. My chest constricted sharply. Could that very key open this box? But why would Prince Jing possess something my mother had hidden away for the first time? I realized the truths I had missed in my previous life might stretch far deeper than I ever imagined. The next morning, word spread all through the capital that I had left the Marquis estate. I had not created a public scene. News circulated because Mei Su had fallen sick. She had cried through the entire night, and woken at dawn burning with high fever. Third brother Lin Yanzi got into a shouting match outside the Imperial Physicians' Academy. My choice to move out became caught up in that argument. Within half a day, every noble young lady in the capital had heard the story. Some called me stubborn and headstrong. Others said I was eaten up with jealousy toward my adopted sister. A small number of people thought the Marquis household had acted cruelly, casting aside their true biological daughter after only 3 years back home, while granting a false child status within the clan. I paid no mind to the chatter. I had far more urgent work ahead of me. Taking full inventory of my mother's estate that in my past life, I had barely touched any of these assets. Father had told me my mother's dowry was managed by the Marquis household, and it would pass to me naturally once my wedding day arrived. I had trusted his words. Only on the eve of my betrothal did I find out that out of 12 capital shops, merely 4 remained. Of those 3 southern tea mountains, only one was left. That father had claimed poor management over the years, and that some holdings had been sold off to cover household expenses. Back then, I had not pressed him for further answers. Now, as I flipped through the original ledgers, I finally saw the unvarnished truth. The businesses had never been mismanaged. Year after year, they had turned solid profits. Those 12 shops alone generated tens of thousands of taels of silver annually. Yet not a single coin of that income had ever flowed into my personal accounts that I sent for old manager Gui, the steward who had overseen my mother's bookkeeping. After he worked through years of records, his beard shook with unbridled anger. Young miss, these are not losses at all. For 16 years, every single profit was siphoned away through the Marquis household's public accounts. The largest single withdrawal, 80,000 taels, had been taken 2 years prior. Manager Gui flipped to a thin supplementary register. The money had been set aside to fund a young lady's coming-of-age celebrations. He did not need to say her name aloud. I already knew. 2 years before, Mei Su had reached her maturity. The Marquis household had thrown a lavish coming-of-age feast that shook the entire capital. Father had gifted her pearls fished from the eastern seas. Oldest brother had given her a famous zither instrument. Second brother presented her with a horse imported from western borderlands. Third brother gave her a chest brimming with southern pearls. I had only just returned to the manor back then. I had no grasp of how enormous those gifts truly were. Now I understood. A portion of that grand celebration had been funded using my mother's dowry. A laugh escaped me. It held no joy, only the bitter realization of how astonishingly foolish I had been in my prior life. Audit every single account covering these past 16 years. I instructed Manager Gui. Write down every last tael. Manager Gui hesitated. If we tally everything fully, the final sum will be enormous. The larger the better, I said, closing the ledger book. They owe me. and they will pay every bit back. 3 days later, my father arrived at Choju Manor in person. This was his first visit since I had moved away. I told Qingdai to serve tea as usual. I did not hide myself from him. Father sat in the main reception hall, his eyes roaming over every corner of the room for a long stretch. "Your mother once loved this place deeply," he said, but I offered no reply. "Did you sleep well last night?" "I slept very well. Do you have enough servants tending to your needs?" "Ido. If you lack anything, you may return to the manor and claim it," he offered. "There is no need," I replied. His brows drew together slightly. "Xiang. Father, you have come here for a specific reason. Have you not?" He fell silent for a moment. "Meisu is unwell." My hand paused mid-motion as I lifted my teacup. "Of course, the imperial physician says her heart is deeply troubled," Father continued. "She wishes to see you. I have no desire to see her. You two are sisters after all." "On the clan registry, yes," I answered. That response darkened his expression. "Must you speak in such a cold fashion?" I looked straight at him. "What words would you prefer I use? Should I weep and grieve over my sister's sickness? That would be a lie. I feel no such sorrow." For once, Father could find no retort. After a long pause, he let out a heavy sigh. "I know resentment sits heavy in your heart. Adding Meisu to the clan registry was my decision. If you must lay blame, blame me." "I do not blame you." I told him that much was honest. Having lived through death and rebirth, I no longer wished to live consumed by grudges. Accounts would be balanced. Debts would be reclaimed, not because I wanted them to wallow in regret, simply because what rightfully belonged to me ought to be returned. Father stared at me, as if he could not comprehend my meaning. "Then why did you move out of the manor?" "I chose to," I said simply. I kept speaking. In everything I did before, I weighed how Father would feel, how my brothers would react, how Meisu might be hurt. I will not live that way any longer. Where I reside, who I keep company with, whom I choose to marry. These choices ought to begin with what I want. A complicated look flickered across my father's features. He was about to speak, when Manager Gue stepped in through the doorway. "Young miss, the first segment of our audit is complete." He noticed my father present and hesitated. "Continue." I told him. Manager Gue laid the thick register down upon the table. "2 shops on Chongangle Lane, the silk merchant establishment in the Eastern Market, and the apothecary shop south of the city. These 4 properties, from the 13th year of Chengshi until the present, have generated combined profits of 148,000 taels. Out of that total, 110,000 taels were transferred into the Yongning Marquis household's official accounts." Complete stillness fell over the main hall. Father's countenance shifted instantly. I kept my gaze lowered, flipping through the pages of the ledger. "Did you know this, Father?" His fingers tightened faintly against his knee. "The household drew upon your mother's holdings to cover expenses over these years." "Drew upon," I repeated, and I gave a faint smile. To borrow something requires a written IOU note. To draw upon something suggests you intend to repay it. The Marquis household held these assets for 16 years. Not a single IOU. Not one tael returned. Does that sound like mere drawing upon to you? Discomfort showed plainly across my father's face. "Your mother was the Marchioness. Using her properties for household costs is hardly improper." "That held true while she was still breathing," I countered. "After her passing, things changed." I slid a deed document across the wooden table toward him. "Mother's will is unambiguous. Every private asset under her name passes to her missing biological daughter. Only in the event that daughter never returned would those possessions be donated to an orphanage. Nowhere in that document does it state the Marquis household holds claim to even a single copper coin." Father's head snapped upward in shock. "You possess your mother's will?" "I do." His reaction was far too quick, far too alarmed. That struck me as strange. I chose not to press further on that point. "I will have Manager Gue draw up formal demands. Every tael and every property the Marquis household has taken must be returned in full. If immediate payment is impossible, a signed written promissory note will suffice." Father's face darkened with every word I spoke. "Xiang, must you settle accounts in such cold-blooded fashion with your own family?" It is precisely because we are family that these matters must be settled clearly. This way, no one can ever claim I owe the Marquis household any debt of upbringing." He fell quiet. As he prepared to depart, he paused in the doorway for a long time. Then he turned back toward me. "Who gave you your mother's will?" "Her loyal people," I replied. "Aunt Ju is here. If you wish to know more, you may ask her yourself." His eyes locked onto Aunt Ju. I saw it clearly. He recognized her, and more than that, fear flickered across his features. Once father had gone, I turned toward Aunt Ju. "How much of the truth did mother uncover back then?" She hesitated for a moment. "Young miss, there were matters I intended to reveal only once you stood on firmer ground." "Tell me now," I insisted. At last, she pulled one old letter from her stack of correspondence. 1 month before the madam's death, she wrote to the old Marquis, your grandfather. In this letter, she wrote that she had uncovered forces working behind concubine Lu. Those forces belonged to the Duke of Anghua's household. I went rigid. The Duke of Anghua's family was the house of Lu Jinghang, my former fiancé from my past life. So even 17 years ago, these two powerful households had already become tangled together. Aunt Ju kept explaining. At that time, both the Yoning Marquis estate and the Duke of Anghua's household were wrapped up in a military grain scandal. Your grandfather, the old Marquis, wanted to launch an investigation, but the Duke's household feared the whole affair would spiral out into public view. As it happened, the madam held a set of trade ledgers that could trace where those missing grain supplies had gone. That was why someone set their sights on her. "And what about me being stolen away as an infant?" I asked. The madam suspected the swap was carried out to seize control over the Marquis household. A terrible thought bloomed inside my mind. If Meisu's placement had never been a random accident from the very start, then her whole existence was nothing more than a pawn in a larger political game. Who had put her there? What did they intend to use her to accomplish? Just then, Qingdai stepped into the room, bringing news that, "Young miss, a formal invitation has arrived from Prince Jing's manor." My fingers stilled. Xiao Jinyang. In my past life, he had held my dying body while charging through the Ministry of Justice. In this new timeline, he had appeared far earlier than my memories had led me to expect. The invitation text was short and simple. 3 days from then, a plum blossom viewing gathering would be held upon Prince Jing's estate. Many young nobles and ladies of the capital would be in attendance. I stared at his written name for a long time. Back in my past life, I had always believed Xiao Chunyang approached me out of political self-interest. Lu Jinghang had convinced me Prince Jing's faction was growing too powerful, and he hoped to manipulate the Marquis household to oppose the crown prince. Again and again, I had rejected his attempts to reach out to me. Looking back now, those so-called advances had mostly been warnings. He had urged me to look into my mother's old financial records. He had warned me not to trust Lu Jinghang. He had even sent a letter 1 month before I was framed for treason. But my third brother had intercepted that message. He had told me Prince Jing harbored evil intentions, and I had believed him. "Will you attend?" Qingdai asked. I folded the invitation closed. "I will go." The plum blossom banquet at Prince Jing's grounds hummed with lively activity. By the time I arrived, nearly half the capital's noble young ladies had assembled. Naturally, Meisu was present as well. Her fever had fully broken. She wore a pale moon-white fox fur cloak, standing among the crowd looking as delicate and fragile as a carefully tended white plum blossom. All 3 of my brothers hovered close by her side. The instant I stepped into view, the murmur of conversation died down noticeably. Many guests stole sideways glances in my direction. Others turned their eyes toward Meisu. Meisu walked over toward me of her own accord. "Sister," she called out, and she lifted her hand toward me. I stepped neatly out of her reach. "Address me as Miss Lin." I said. Her face paled. "Sister, why speak to me like this? You are now inscribed within our clan registry. You are Miss Lin. Is there some problem with that?" She bit down hard on her lower lip. Second brother Lin Lingu hurried over. "Xiang, that is quite enough." I lifted my gaze toward him. "Exactly what have I done that is too much, second brother?" "Meisu has blamed herself endlessly over what has happened between you these past days. She has only just recovered from illness. Can you not grant her a little consideration?" Before I could form a reply, a lazy male voice cut through the surrounding chatter. Young Master Lin. I find myself rather curious. Did Lin Xiang make her fall ill? Every guest fell quiet. Xiao Qinyang walked out from behind the plum grove trees. He wore black brocade official robes, with a single dark jade pendant hanging at his waist. Just as I remembered. His brows carried a cold sharpness, his expression distant and detached. Second brother bowed low at once. Your Highness, Prince Jing. Xiao Qinyang did not even glance in his direction. His gaze settled on me. Miss Lin, do my plum blossoms meet with your approval? I inclined my head in polite greeting. They are very beautiful. Good, he said. He turned toward his household steward standing nearby. From this point onward, send all plum banquet invitations to Qiuju Manor. Do not send them to the Yongning Marquis estate. Everyone in that garden understood immediately. He was making a public statement. I now stood separate from the Marquis household. Meisu's carefully maintained smile almost crumbled entirely. Oldest brother Lin Yanji fixed his stare on Xiao Qinyang. Your Highness appears to take great interest in my sister. At long last, Xiao Qinyang directed his eyes toward him. Your sister? Which young lady are you referring to, Lord Lin? Someone among the onlookers could not hold back a quiet laugh. Oldest brother's features hardened. Yet for the very first time, I found myself thinking that Prince Jing's sharp tongue held a strange kind of appeal. Halfway through the banquet, Lu Jingheng arrived. The moment he stepped into the garden, Meisu's eyes lit up with obvious delight. In my past life, I had lied repeatedly to myself, telling myself their bond was nothing more than childhood familiarity. Watching them now, the attraction between them was so obvious it practically shouted itself aloud. Lu Jingheng walked toward me first. Xiang, I heard you have moved out of the Marquis estate. I have, I answered. Why did you not inform me? The question rolled off his tongue as if I was some possession of his, and every choice I made required his approval. I thought back to my past existence. After the imperial betrothal promise had been spoken, I had shaped 3 full years of my life around him. He preferred light-flavored dishes, so I learned to cook Southern-style cuisine. He studied for the spring civil service examinations, so I stayed up late organizing his study materials. When his mother fell sick, I traveled to the Duke of Anghua's manor every single day to tend to her. Yet he had never once asked what my own heart desired. Young Master Lu, we are not formally betrothed. I told him. His expression stiffened slightly. Our 2 families have long since reached an understanding. That is all it ever was, an understanding. No formal marriage contract, no imperial decree, no exchanged betrothal tokens. My choice of residence does not require your consent. Nearby guests began to lean in, listening closely. Lu Jingheng clearly had not anticipated this response from me. Xiang, are you angry with me? I am not. Is this because of Meisu? I laughed out loud. Why does everyone assume every single decision I make must revolve around her? Meisu's face went deathly pale. Lu Jingheng's eyes instinctively darted back toward her. I had seen that exact gesture countless times in my past life. Each time, I had manufactured excuses for him. Now all of that felt utterly pointless. I pulled a jade pendant from the sash around my waist. This was the token the Duke of Anghua's household had sent 2 years prior. I held it out in full view of every person present in the plum garden. Since we are all gathered here today, I wish to make something perfectly clear. Lu Jingheng's brows drew tight in confusion. What are you doing? I am returning this to you. The surrounding air turned completely silent. Meisu's head shot upward in shock. Oldest brother's voice rumbled low and sharp. Xiang. I ignored him entirely. The Duke of Anghua and the Yongning Marquis household once discussed a potential marriage arrangement, but I no longer wish to pursue it. This matter ends here. Lu Jingheng refused to take the pendant. His features grew colder by the second. Do you comprehend the weight of your own words? Herido. Marriage is no trivial game. That is precisely why I am being cautious enough to reject this match openly. We were never formally betrothed. There is no existing engagement to break. I set the jade pendant down upon the stone garden table. We will speak no more of this union. He stared at me as if seeing me for the very first time. Give me a reason. I flicked a quick glance toward Mei. Young Master Lu knows full well where your true affections lie. Meisu's face turned completely white. Sister, do not speak such nonsense. She protested that I chose not to expose her secrets, not yet. I simply turned and began walking away behind my back. Lu Jinghang's voice cut through the garden air. Lin Xiang, if you walk away right now, do not come crawling back with regret. I paused mid-step and glanced over my shoulder. In my old life I had carried that regret. I regretted I had not seen the truth far sooner. Do not worry. The thing I regret most of all is that I ever wished to marry you. Entire Plum Garden fell dead silent. Xiao Chunyong leaned against a covered corridor railing, sipping tea. I caught the faint upward curve at the corner of his lips. When I returned home from Prince Jing's manor, just as everyone had predicted, the Marquis household erupted into chaos. Father sent messengers summoning me that very night. I refused to go. The next day, oldest brother came in person. Still I declined. On the third day, my father arrived directly, bringing 2 senior clan elders with him. He intended to pressure me into submission using the authority of our family. I invited them all inside Choju Manor. One of the elder uncles sat down and immediately began lecturing that Xiang, for an unmarried young lady to live alone outside the family estate is improper from the very start. I responded, which statute within the Great Yong legal code states an unmarried woman cannot reside within property that belongs solely to her? The elder man choked on his own words, unable to give an answer. A second clan elder spoke in a heavy, solemn tone. Beyond written law, there are matters of proper social custom. Then which custom permits a girl with no blood relation to our clan to be written into our registry as a legitimate daughter? I shot back. The whole room went still. My father's face turned iron gray. I kept speaking. If this clan wishes to debate proper custom, let us begin with its most fundamental rules. But if these standards of conduct are only meant to bind and restrict me alone, then I shall pay them no heed. At last my father lost his composure. What exactly do you want? I want nothing beyond 3 things. Repay every silver tael the Marquis household has taken from me. Return every piece of property my mother left behind. From now onward, my own marriage will be my own decision. Beyond these terms, I will not interfere in any of the Marquis household's internal business. The clan elder's eyes widened in shock. How can a young woman claim the right to choose her own marriage partner? I looked toward my father. If you refuse these terms, father, that is perfectly acceptable. In that case, I will submit a formal petition to the Imperial Clan Court, requesting my name be fully separated from the Marquis household register. You dare? He slammed his fist down against the tabletop. I did not flinch. Why would I not dare? I do not depend on the Marquis household for survival. The wealth my mother left behind is more than enough to sustain me for my entire lifetime. That statement struck exactly where it hurt. Our full audit had calculated misappropriated funds totaling 270,000 taels. The Marquis household could never hope to produce such a sum all at once. Father stormed off, his face thunderous with rage. But the very day after he departed, an imperial summons arrived. The Empress wished to see me. I knew genuine trouble was approaching. The Empress was a member of the Duke of Anghua's bloodline. She was Lu Jinghang's paternal aunt. In my past life, she had been the very person who had arranged my proposed marriage to Lu Jinghang. When I stepped inside the palace audience chamber, Meisu was already present. She sat beneath the Empress's dais, her eyes faintly red. The Empress looked toward me, her tone calm and unrushed. Xiang, word has reached me you no longer wish to proceed with a marriage to Jinghang. That is correct, I answered. Why so? Our temperaments do not suit one another. The Empress let out a quiet, mocking laugh. You have met so very few times. How could you possibly judge that your natures clash? Then I shall speak plainly. I do not care for him. Silence descended across the hall. Meisu spoke in a soft voice. Sister, young Master Lu has always looked out for you over all these years. I turned my gaze toward her. He has looked out for you as well. Her cheeks flushed bright red. The Empress's gaze shifted sharply. Xiang, marriage cannot be decided based merely on personal fondness. The Anghua ducal house and your Marquis household are perfectly matched in social standing. Jinghang ranks among the most promising young men of his generation. Should you marry into their household, you will not suffer mistreatment. In my past life, I had believed those words. Only later did I uncover the truth. That so-called well-matched union existed because they coveted my mother's southern merchant networks. They wanted to leverage the Marquis household's connections to my maternal grandfather's family, to keep covering up that 17-year-old military grain scandal. That I bowed my head respectfully. Your Majesty speaks with great wisdom. The Empress's expression softened a small degree, yet I must still decline this marriage offer, I added. The smile vanished off her face. What if I were to issue an imperial marriage decree? The weight of her royal authority pressed heavy over the whole room that I lifted my chin to meet her eyes. Your Majesty holds the Phoenix imperial seal. Yet you do not possess the authority to decide a marquis's legitimate daughter's marriage in the emperor's place. Every palace attendant in the room bowed their heads low. Mesu stared at me in complete shock that I continued speaking. If I am forced into a marriage against my will, I will go straight to the emperor himself and demand he settle this matter. The Empress held my gaze for a long moment. You possess remarkable nerve. I only wish to protect my own life, I replied. Her eyes darkened. I knew I had spoken with excessive bluntness, but I meant every word. When people learn you can be pushed around, they will keep pressing you further and further until you are trapped with nowhere left to retreat. You must show them from the very first encounter you are willing to overturn the board. Only then will they recalculate the cost of opposing you. Tension hung thick in the air. Then a eunuch's voice echoed from outside the hall. His Highness Prince Jing has arrived. Xiao Zhenyang will get in. He acted as if he had not noticed the fraught atmosphere filling the room. He bowed respectfully toward the Empress. Greetings, Your Majesty, royal sister-in-law. The Empress glanced over toward him. You choose a most interesting moment to pay us a visit. My brother, the Emperor, has sent me to deliver military dispatches from the northwest borderlands, he explained. He handed the documents over to a palace eunuch. Then his gaze swept across and landed on me. Miss Lin is also present, the Empress said flatly. We were just discussing her proposed marriage to Jinghang. Xiao Qinyang's facial expression remained unchanged. That is a matter that ought to be weighed very carefully. The Empress pressed him. Prince Jing, what is your opinion on this affair? How dare I offer opinions on such matters, he said. He paused briefly. I will note only this: last year, the young heir of the Anghua ducal household spent 3 months in the southern provinces. During that journey, he met privately with a certain young woman. If an imperial marriage decree is issued before that incident has been properly investigated, and word of this should leak out later, it may reflect very poorly upon Your Majesty's reputation. Mesu's teacup slipped from her grasp and crashed against the stone floor, shattering with a sharp crack. My eyes snapped toward her face. That last year, the southern provinces. That was exactly the time Mesu had traveled to my maternal grandfather's territory to recuperate from illness. That Xiao Qinyang's words were not merely bailing me out of a difficult spot. He was pressing a sharp blade directly into my hand. That the Empress's expression shifted. Qinyang, you must not speak recklessly. Whether these words are reckless or truthful can be verified by checking the guest registries at courier stations along the southern roads, he said, with a faint calm smile. I have also heard the surname of that young woman is Lin. Total silence swallowed the audience hall. I looked at Mesu's deathly pale face. In that instant, I felt certain of one thing. Those two had carried on their connection far earlier than I had ever guessed in my past life. That when I left the palace, I did not travel straight back to Qiuju Manor. Xiao Qinyang's carriage waited outside the palace gates. He stood beside it. Miss Lin. Your Highness, you were waiting for me. I was, he admitted openly. Why did you help me? I was not doing you any favors. Then what was that? Repaying an old debt. My heart skipped a beat. What do you owe me? He gave no answer. Instead, he pulled a small silver key out from inside his sleeve. It was identical to the key I had seen in my final dying moments in my past life. My breath almost caught in my throat. Where did you obtain this? Xiao Qinyang looked steadily at me. Your mother entrusted this to my mother. 17 years ago. Your Highness was only a child back then, I said, my fingertips turning cold. 8 years old, he confirmed. Your mother once saved my mother's life. Later, when she foresaw danger closing in around her, she passed the sandalwood box and its matching key into my mother's safekeeping. After my own mother died, this key came into my possession. I took the key into my palm. My hands trembled slightly. Why hand it over to me only now? I attempted to deliver it once before. My head snapped upward in surprise. The very first year you returned to the Marquis household, I sent messengers to bring it to you. Your third brother sent the key back to me. Of course. I remembered that intercepted letter from my past life. A dull ache settled deep within my chest at Xiang. He spoke my given name out loud that you do not need to blame yourself for all the things you failed to see back then. I looked toward him. He offered no empty comforting phrases. He simply spoke in a calm, level voice that, back then, every person surrounding you was loyal to the Marquis household. If they wished to keep knowledge hidden from you, it was only natural you never uncovered it. That was not your fault. Unexpectedly, my nose stung. This was likely the very first time since my rebirth that someone had not told me I ought to have been smarter, ought to have been stronger, ought to have noticed danger sooner. He simply told me none of it had been my failing that I gripped the silver key tight within my hand. What repayment do you require from me in return for this? Xiao Qinyang smiled faintly. You remain just as you always were. Were we close in times past? We were not. Then how would your highness know what I was like? Every time you encountered me, you regarded me as if I were some thief come to steal from you. I blinked, caught completely off guard by his observation that he turned and climbed up into his carriage. Once you open that box, if you wish to speak further, you may seek me out. What lies inside concerns far more than merely the Marquis household. Back at Qiuju Manor, I immediately went to the purple sandalwood lockbox. The silver key fit perfectly within its mechanism. Inside lay no gold or silver treasure. Only 3 objects remained. A letter written in my mother's own handwriting, addressed to me. A ledger recording military grain transport records. And half a bronze token. Its surface scorched by old fire damage. I unfolded the letter first. My mother's calligraphy was elegant and neat. The very opening lines brought tears stinging to my eyes that I asterisked my daughter Xiang. If you are reading these words, it means your mother's long wait has not been in vain. Asterisk. I pressed a hand over my mouth, and kept reading that my mother wrote that she had never accepted I had died. The wet nurse infant swap story had never convinced her. She had investigated and learned only 3 carriages had entered and exited the Marquis compound on that fateful day. One of those carriages belonged to the Duke of Anghua's household. Following that trail, she had learned that Lu Jingheng's maternal aunt had worked as a wet nurse within the Anghua ducal household for multiple years. Meisu's birth mother was that exact same woman that my mother suspected. This had been a deliberate infant substitution plot. The goal was not to grant a random girl a life of luxury. It was to plant a person the conspirators could fully control, right inside the Yongning Marquis household, that my mother had also uncovered the military grain scandal. During the Great Drought across the northwest borderlands, the imperial court had allocated 500,000 dan of military grain supplies. Only 300,000 dan had actually reached the border troops. The missing 200,000 dan had been sold off for profit through southern merchant trade routes. Evidence included official seals from former Marquis household officials, alongside transport documents belonging to the Anghua ducal house. The most critical page of the ledger she had carefully hidden away that I flipped toward the end of that grain transport ledger. Sure enough, one page was missing entirely. The final sentence of my mother's letter read, "If you return home, place no trust in anyone within the Marquis household, including your own father." I sat beside the oil lamp, motionless for a very long time. So my father might have known pieces of the truth. At the very least, my mother had suspected him. The next morning, I carefully stored my mother's letter in a secure place. I took only the military grain ledger and traveled to Prince Jing's estate. When Xiao Chunyang finished reading its contents, his expression turned grim. So this scandal truly did happen. Your Highness already knew something of this? I only knew foul play had taken place. 3 officials assigned to investigate this case all died before they could finish their work. Your maternal grandfather resigned from his official post and returned to his hometown because of this affair. I suddenly thought of my grandfather. In my past life, after I returned to the Marquis estate, my grandfather's household had sent messengers to fetch me. But my father had claimed my grandfather was gravely ill and could not receive guests. Later, before my own wedding, my grandfather passed away. I had never once laid eyes on him. Is my grandfather still alive? I asked. Xiao Chunyang looked straight toward me. He is most certainly alive. My whole body jolted in shock. Where is he now? In Jiangju. Only last year. He even submitted a formal memorial criticizing the Ministry of Revenue. I could barely find my voice. The Marquis household told me my grandfather had been bedridden with illness for years. Not only is he alive, he still has the strength to submit official memorials. Why would they hide this truth from me? Xiao Chunyang grasped the full implication. You were never told? I shook my head. He fell quiet for a moment. It seems the Marquis household fears more than just you digging into old financial accounts. They also fear you rebuilding connections with your mother's family. I resolved immediately I would travel to Jiangju. But before I could set off, new trouble erupted within the Marquis household. That manager Gui delivered the final complete 16-year audit report. In total, the Marquis household had misappropriated 387,000 taels from my mother's dowry. 120,000 taels had covered ordinary household running costs. 90,000 taels had funded my three brothers' education, military postings, and official career advancement. 80,000 taels had been spent on Mei Su's coming-of-age ceremony and her day-to-day living expenses. Close to 100,000 taels more had simply vanished without any record. I sent the full set of account books over to the Marquis estate, together with a formal written repayment demand. They had 3 days to respond. If they failed, I would bring the entire dispute before the capital magistrate's court. At the moment that news spread, the whole Marquis household descended into chaos. That my father arrived at Chiuju Manor that very night. He did not come alone. All three of my brothers accompanied him. Mei Su also followed. She stood behind my father, her eyes red and glistening. Sister, she began. I never knew that wealth belonged to you. I nodded. Do you know now? She bit her lower lip. All the things I used, I can give them back to you. Very well. I said that she had clearly not expected me to accept her offer so readily. Convert those goods into silver. 80,000 taels. I clarified. Third brother Lin Yanzi shot abruptly to his feet. Lin Xiang. I lifted my gaze toward him. What is it? Mei Su offers to return what she used. That is an act of generosity on her part. Yet you intend to demand payment from her anyway. Why would I not? I countered. Everything she made use of originally belonged to me. Second brother's expression soured. You were not even living within the manor at that time. That silver would have sat unused regardless. I gave a short laugh. Second brother draws a salary of 50 taels each month. When you are away from home, that salary also sits untouched. Does that entitle me to help myself to it? His face darkened with anger. That oldest brother remained silent until I pushed the full account ledger directly in front of him. Out of those 90,000 taels, 20,000 paid for your official apprenticeship. 30,000 covered preparations for second brother's entry into the Imperial Guard. 18,000 bought third brother his horse ranch. The rest went toward your books, schooling, and social networking expenses over the years. Every single one of their faces underwent a visible change. In my past life, they had constantly repeated how the Marquis household had fed me, clothed me, granted me status, and I ought to feel endless gratitude. Now they saw the truth. Even their own careers had been built in part upon my mother's dowry. Oldest brother read through the ledger for a very long time. I had no knowledge of any of this, he said. I believe you. I replied that he lifted his head to look at me. Yet ignorance does not release you from the obligation to repay what was taken. I finished. His Adam's apple bobbed. I will repay my share. That was the first time among my three brothers that one of them had not immediately rushed to make excuses. Second brother's features twisted with conflict. But eventually he spoke. I will find a way to pay back my portion. Third brother let out a sneer. It is merely a horse ranch. I will sell it and settle my debt. Mei Su suddenly burst into tears. All of this is my fault. If I had never stayed within the Marquis household, none of these misfortunes would have come to pass. Third brother immediately stepped forward to comfort her. I watched that familiar scene unfold, and only a heavy weariness settled over my heart, that at last my father spoke. 387,000 taels. The Marquis household cannot produce such a sum within 3 days. Then we arrange installment payments. 10 years. I offered that a Xiang, he protested that if father refuses those terms, then we will settle this matter through the courts. He stared hard at me. Finally he conceded that a 5 years. Agreed. But we must draw up formal written contracts, sealed with official household stamps. My father's face turned ashen gray. Even so, he placed the Marquis household seal upon that dead agreement. In that single moment, our relationship shifted at its very foundation. Once, I had been a daughter begging for acceptance. Now we were nothing more than creditor and debtors. Oddly enough, I felt a great weight lift off my shoulders. A few days afterward, I set off for Jiangju. Xiao Qinyang sent 10 of his manor guards to accompany my journey. I tried to decline. I am not sending them for your personal safety, he told me. They are protecting the grain scandal ledgers. I glanced toward him. So the ledgers matter more than I do? For the time being, he answered. A small laugh escaped me. Even though I felt annoyed, he added quietly. Of course you matter more. I climbed into my traveling carriage. I could feel my ears growing a little warm. Jiangju lay 800 li away from the capital. On the 3rd day of our journey, our traveling party was ambushed on the official post road. These were no ordinary bandits. Every single attack targeted our carriages and our stored luggage. I understood instantly. They sought to seize the grain scandal ledgers. Xiao Qinyang's guards formed a defensive shield around me, but our attackers were far too numerous. Amid the chaos, Qingdai grabbed my wrist and pulled me running toward nearby woods. Footsteps chased close behind us. I had already died once before. Yet I had never faced men wielding sharp blades. Fear gripped me. My palms grew slick with cold sweat. Qingdai was even more terrified, yet she threw her own body in front of mine. Young miss, run. I refused to flee without her. If we run together. We circled around toward the slope's rear side. I recalled studying a map before departing the capital. An abandoned salt well stood somewhere in this vicinity. I tugged Qingdai toward that location. Our pursuers closed in fast. Just as we neared the well's edge, an arrow came flying from behind us. I heard Qingdai give a sharp gasp. She collapsed heavily into my arms. My mind went completely blank. In my past life, this was how she had died. While investigating secrets connected to my fate, I had thought a second chance would let me outrun every single old regret. But fate seemed determined to hand me that same knife all over again. Qingdai. The arrow had buried itself in her shoulder. Her skin turned deathly pale. Young miss, go, she whispered. That I would not leave her behind. I dragged her behind a large boulder. I ripped the jeweled golden hairpin out of my own hair. One of our hunters rounded the boulder. I drove that sharp hairpin straight into his eye. He screamed in agony. I snatched his short sword. My hand shook so violently I could barely keep hold of the blade. I swung it wildly. My first strike missed completely. The second sliced across his wrist. Before I could make a third swing, another figure ran our attacker through with a sword. Xiao Qinyang stood before me. His robes were splattered with blood. I could not tell whether it belonged to him or our enemies. Xiang. I had never heard him speak my name with such heavy urgency. He seized my shoulders. Are you wounded? I shook my head. Qingdai, I gasped. He knelt down at once beside her. The arrow missed vital organs. She will survive. My legs gave way beneath me. I nearly crumpled to the ground. He caught hold of me. It is all over now. I clutched tightly onto the fabric of his sleeve. My hands would not stop trembling. I thought I was going to lose everything all over again. He made no attempt to brush away my fear with empty platitudes. He simply stood there and let me cling to him. That when my breathing steadied at last, he spoke softly. You already saved her. I lifted my eyes toward him. Truly. Truly. That night, we stopped to rest inside a nearby county town. From one of our captured attackers, Xiao Qinyang extracted a confession. These men served a private manor on the outer lands belonging to the Duke of Anghua. That told us everything we needed to know. Does Lu Jinghang know about this ambush? I asked. Most likely not, Xiao Qinyang replied. The Duke himself is a far more dangerous opponent than his son. I stared out the window. Then we will not alert them we possess this information. What do you intend to do? Let them believe the ledgers were destroyed in the ambush. Xiao Qinyang raised one eyebrow. Are you certain? They dared to commit murder on an official imperial road. That shows just how desperate they have grown. The more desperate they become, the more mistakes they will make. He studied my face for a long moment. Xiang, you have changed a great deal. Something tightened within my chest. Does your highness know me so well? Not precisely. But the girl I once observed would have first asked what the Marquis household ought to do. Now you ask what you yourself can accomplish. That observation struck home. Rebirth alone had not reshaped me. What truly transformed me was that I would no longer hand over control of my own life to other people. When we finally arrived in Jiangju, my grandfather waited for us right down at the dock, standing upon the pier. Seeing that vigorous elderly man standing there, tears spilled down my cheeks before I could hold them back. His own eyes grew moist. Yet the very first words out of his mouth were angry. Xia Chongshan, that bastard. He dared tell me you refused to see your mother's family. I froze. He told you I would not come visit you? The year after you returned to the Marquis estate, I sent people to bring you here, my grandfather recounted. Your father claimed you thought Jiangju lay too far away, and had turned down the invitation. Later I wrote you multiple letters. Every single one vanished without a reply. Pieces clicked into place in my memory. Over those 2 years, Father had always told me my maternal grandfather's household held me in contempt. He said following my mother's death, Grandfather blamed me for her passing and would not acknowledge my existence. All of those had been lies. Grandfather brought me back to the Gu family residence that night. He laid out every fragment of the truth he knew. When my mother had investigated the grain scandal, she had sent the most critical missing page of the ledger back to Jiangju. But the messenger transporting it had disappeared mid-journey. That vital page had never resurfaced after my mother's death. Grandfather had suspected the Marquis household was responsible. Yet he had no solid proof. I always wanted to bring you away from there, the old man said, squeezing my hand tight. But Xia Chongshan insisted you had fully accepted the Marquis household as your family, and would refuse to leave the capital. I feared forcing the issue would ruin your public reputation. I bowed my head. Everyone who might have genuinely wished to help me had been kept completely cut off from me. The Marquis household had acted like a thick wall shutting them all out. Grandfather, I said, I want to uncover the full truth of this matter. He looked at me for a long time. The path ahead will be dangerous. I had already died once. I kept that thought locked inside my heart, and spoke aloud. If I do not pursue this investigation, every step I take from now on could land on traps other people buried long ago. At last he nodded his head. Very well. Within the Gu residence, I gained access to the true sprawling commercial network my mother had built. Southern region tea plantations, salt trade operations, medicinal herb supply chains, silk merchants. All these years, the Marquis household had only seized a small fraction of her business empire. The core trading firms had always remained in the hands of loyal old Gu family stewards. Grandfather handed me a master business ledger. This was your mother's gift for you. She said if you ever returned, she would not merely give you piles of silver. She would give you the knowledge to understand how that this was your mother's gift for you. She said if you ever returned, she would not merely give you piles of silver. She would give you the knowledge to understand how that silver is earned. For a full month, I sat side by side with her senior managers. I learned to interpret market price fluctuations, parse dense legal contracts, trace long-distance water trade routes, and watch how merchant houses negotiated with local government officials. That I once believed the greatest safety a woman could hope for came from a good marriage. But the day I personally closed a 30,000 tael tea trading deal, everything shifted. Silver you earn with your own 2 hands. Workers you can command. Contracts you hold firmly in your grasp. That was genuine security. A month rolled by. News traveled all the way from the capital to Jiangju. Lu Jinghang and Meisu's secret affair had been exposed. I had not leaked the information myself. It was the Empress who uncovered the trail that records from courier station guest logs in the southern region proved the pair had stayed in the same private mountain villa 3 separate times. There was no irrefutable proof of misconduct. Yet suspicion blazed through noble society. To make matters worse, Lu Jinghang had publicly claimed he journeyed south to audit regional tax records. In truth, he held zero official business there. Desperate to quiet the swirling gossip, the Duke of Onghua resolved to arrange a speedy wedding for Lu Jinghang. The bride they selected was not Mei Su. It was the eldest legitimate daughter of the Minister of Rights. When that letter reached me, I was busy checking accounts for the Tea Mountains. Qingdai, now fully recovered from her arrow wound, watched me carefully. "Young miss, hearing this news, do you feel anything at all?" I sat quiet for a moment, then laughed out loud. It was the first true unburdened laugh I had known since my rebirth. Relief, I told her. But only a few days later, a second urgent letter arrived. Mei Su had vanished without a trace. The Marquis household was spreading rumors that I had abducted her. Reading those words, anger burned sharp and cold inside me. My third brother traveled all the way to Zhongju himself. The instant he stepped through the Gu residence doors, his voice boomed, "Where is Mei Su?" I looked at him, travel dust coating his robes. "You crossed 800 li just to ask me that question?" Before she disappeared, she went to Choju Manor. Your own servants reported she came hoping to see me. But I was already gone from the capital. "Lin Xiang," he shouted, his eyes bloodshot. "She has been missing for 7 whole days. Can you truly feel no concern?" I studied his face. "Have you considered she chose to run away of her own free will? Why would she do such a thing?" "Because Lu Jinghang is about to marry another woman." Lin Yanzi froze rigid where he stood. "Third brother, you know her better than almost anyone. You ought to understand exactly what she values most in this world." His lips parted, yet no words came out. That same night, one of Xiao Qinyang's private messengers delivered a secret report. Mei Su had not vanished at all. She was hiding inside a remote country villa belonging to the Duke of Onghua's estate. More alarming still, the Duke himself had been visiting that property frequently. It hit me all at once. That villa was far more than a hiding place for a disgraced young woman. "I must go back to the capital," I said to Xiao Chanyang. He gave me a long measuring look. "Now. And now." We set off that very same night. 3 days after we arrived back in the capital, I set watchers to keep constant eyes on that secluded villa. Sure enough, deep in the middle of one dark night, a convoy carried crates of old documents out of the compound. We did not intercept them on the spot. Instead, our men tailed the wagons all the way to an abandoned shrine just outside the city walls. Right there, those wooden crates were thrown onto a roaring bonfire. That I waited until the flames burned down to smoldering ash. Then I ordered my people to sift through every last cinder. Buried among the burnt wreckage, they dug up half of a scorched bronze token. It fit perfectly against the half token I had retrieved from my mother's sandalwood box. That when we pressed the 2 broken halves together, for carved characters became clear. Northwest Grain Transport. At 17 years of tangled threads finally wove together. That country villa had operated as a hidden storage depot for the grain smuggling operation. The Duke of Onghua's people had tried their utmost to burn every shred of evidence. What they did not know was my mother had safeguarded half the token. They also never guessed we already held the grain transport ledgers. Only one critical piece remained missing. The final, most damning page of those ledgers. And I suspected it was still hidden somewhere inside the former Yongning Marquis estate. That for the first time since I moved out, I voluntarily returned to the Marquis Manor. My father was visibly shocked when he laid eyes on me. "You still remember how to come back to this house?" "I have come to investigate the truth behind my mother's death and the old grain transport scandal." His expression shifted instantly. "What old business are you talking about?" "The military grain embezzlement case from 17 years ago." Silence flooded the main hall. All 3 of my brothers were present in the room. Mei Su was nowhere to be seen. My father stared hard at me. "Who told you of this affair?" "So you do know of it?" He did not attempt to deny my words. Oldest brother Lin Yanji reacted first, his face full of confusion. "Father, what is this all about?" My father spoke flatly. "This has nothing to do with you boys." I let out a bitter laugh. How could it have nothing to do with this family? This is what my mother was digging into when she lost her life. Every brother's face turned grave. I laid the half-recovered bronze token down upon the wooden table. The Duke of Anghua's household is already burning every scrap of proof they can find. My grain ledger is missing its final page. I need to know whether that page is concealed within these walls. My father's complexion grew paler and paler. After a long heavy pause, he sank down heavily into a chair. He looked as though years had been stripped from him in mere moments. "Xiang," he said, his voice worn thin. "Some matters are far more complicated than you imagine." "Then explain them to me." He lifted his tired eyes at those 200,000 dan of missing military grain. The Marquis household did not steal them. Back in the late reign of the previous emperor, princes fought viciously over the imperial succession. Someone diverted that grain to fund private armies. Cold dread settled heavy in my bones. This was no simple corruption scandal. This was high treason. Who was behind it? Father squeezed his eyes shut at the third prince of that era. He did not finish his sentence. Yet I understood completely. The current Duke of Anghua had been that third prince's maternal uncle. And that third prince had supposedly died of illness 16 years prior. His son was the present crown prince, born to the sitting empress. That if this old case was dragged out into open court, it would drag the Eastern Palace itself down into ruin. That was why no official had dared dig into it for decades. My father kept speaking to, when your mother uncovered the full truth, she intended to report everything straight to the late emperor. But the political atmosphere was deadly. I stood in her way. My fingernails dug deep into my own palms, and because she refused to abandon her investigation, you let her die. The moment those words left my mouth, all three brothers gasped in shock. My father's head snapped upward, raw terror flashing across his features. I did not kill her. His voice cracked with desperation. I stared at him. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. I never struck her. I only passed word to the Duke of Anghua about what your mother had uncovered. That confession sickened me more than if he had admitted to murder with his own hands. He may not have wielded the poison cup himself, but he had handed the murderers every piece of information they needed. Tears spilled down my cheeks even as I laughed hollowly. "Why did you do it?" He hung his head low. By then, the Marquis household was already tangled up in this mess. Some of your grandfather's old subordinates had worked transporting those stolen grain supplies. If the case exploded into public view, the entire Lin clan would have been condemned. So he had chosen the survival of the household, exactly as they had chosen the household over me in my past life dungeon. This pattern of betrayal had started one full generation before my own suffering. That oldest brother's face had gone ashen. "Father, about mother's death. I never imagined the Duke of Anghua would go so far," my father said hoarsely. "I only wanted him to dispose of those damning ledgers. I never dreamed she would fall ill just 3 days afterward." I shot sharply to my feet. It was no ordinary illness. Aunt Ju has pieced together the facts. Her symptoms match slow, deliberate poisoning. My father froze completely. Rage burned itself out inside me, leaving only exhaustion. "Where is that final page of the ledger?" He stayed silent. I turned toward the doorway. "Tomorrow I will submit formal documents to the judicial temple." Oldest brother's head jerked upward. "Xiang, are you going to press charges against our father? This is not about personal accusation. It is about crimes that were committed. Someone has to investigate the truth." "What of the Marquis household?" third brother demanded. I glanced back at him. Memories of my prison cell suffering rose unbidden. "If the household is innocent, nothing will befall it. If it bears guilt, then it must bear its own consequences." Second brother ground his teeth together. "Do you truly cast all family bonds aside?" I held his gaze for a long moment. "Second brother, when I first came back to this manor, you once told me blood ties can never truly be cut. I believed you then. Now I know, blood cannot be severed, but affection most certainly can fade away." The next day, I traveled to the judicial temple. I did not immediately file criminal charges against my father. Instead, I submitted a formal petition to reopen the 17-year-old military grain case, alongside all the evidence I had gathered. The chief judge dared not accept the document. Opening the case would shake the crown prince's position. Then my oldest brother stepped forward. He stamped the petition with his official judicial temple seal. It was the first time he had stood firmly on my side. "I take full responsibility for this evidence," he said. "If disaster follows, I will bear it together with you." I looked at him. Why? He fell quiet for a long breath. "I have presided over countless cases here for 7 years. If I cannot face the truth for my own family, I have no right to wear these official robes." For the first time, I saw oldest brother not merely as my kin, but as a man of real, unshakable principle. Neither of us foresaw how swift and brutal the backlash would be. That very same night, fire broke out inside the judicial temple. The grain ledgers we had submitted nearly burned to ash. At the exact same hour, Qingdai was kidnapped. A written note was left behind. "Bring my mother's original letter and the bronze token to the old granary outside the city, if I wish to see her alive again." When Xiao Qinyang received this news, his whole demeanor turned ice cold. "You cannot go. This is a trap." "I have to go. It is a death trap." "I know. Then why risk yourself? Qingdai already took an arrow for me once. I will not let her die for me a second time." Xiao Qinyang stared into my eyes. "You cannot rescue her all by yourself." That was when I swallowed my pride and spoke the words out loud. "Xiao Qinyang, I need your help." Something shifted deep inside his gaze. No long flowery speeches. Just one short, firm reply, "Very well." We laid 2 layers of defense. I would carry fake ledgers and a counterfeit bronze token to the granary. Prince Jing's soldiers would lie hidden in ambush all around the site. Oldest brother and judicial temple officers would hold position on the outer perimeter. But we had underestimated our enemies. The men waiting within that granary were not ordinary assassins in the Duke of Anghua's pay. They were private royal guards answering directly to the Eastern Palace. And Meisu was there too. When she caught sight of me, none of her usual soft, fragile performance remained. "Sister, you actually came." Qingdai was bound tight to a wooden pillar. Blood streaked across her face. I forced myself not to stare at my wounded mate. "Release her first." Meisu smiled coldly. "Still so naive. Do you think I went through all this trouble merely for a few old documents?" I stared at her. "What do you want then?" "Your place." I almost thought I had misheard her. She stepped slowly closer toward me. "Do you know what I hate most about you? It is not that you returned. It is that after you came home, everyone kept reminding me I never truly belonged to the Lin family. The courtyard I loved was yours. The father I called mine for 16 years was yours. Even Lu Jinghang's heart. People whispered I had stolen him away from you." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of bitter rage, not sorrow. "I grew up inside this marquis household. I was the daughter they cherished. Why did you have to come back and ruin everything?" I looked upon her, and a flicker of pity stirred in my chest. "So you knew all along about the infant swap?" She laughed sharply. "I found out later. My birth mother told me." "Where is your birth mother now?" "Dead," she said far too casually. "But before she died, she told me what happened. Your mother dug too deep into the truth, so she had to be eliminated." My hands clenched into tight fists. "Who poisoned her?" She refused to answer that question. Instead she sneered. "Sister, you ought to be worrying about your own fate." In the next heartbeat, every heavy wooden granary door slammed shut. The sharp, thick smell of lamp oil flooded the air. My heart lurched. She intended to burn this whole building to the ground. Are you insane? Only the dead stop digging up buried old secrets. She began to back toward the side exit. But the moment she reached the doorway, shouts erupted from outside. The doors crashed open. Xiao Qinyang burst in at the head of his soldiers. I sprinted straight for Qingdai. The fire had already caught onto wooden beams. Smoke thickened fast. In the chaos, one of the Eastern Palace guards charged toward me with a drawn blade. I had just sliced through Qingdai's restraints, and I had no time to dodge. A body threw itself directly in front of me. The sharp sword sank deep into a man's shoulder. It was my third brother, Lin Yanzi. I froze completely. Gritting his teeth against the agony. He kicked the attacker away. What are you standing there for? Run. I grabbed hold of his arm. How did you get here? I followed oldest brother. Pain twisted his features. Do not get the wrong idea. I am not saving you out of kindness. I just do not want any more lives lost from this household. I did not argue with his stubborn denial. We barely stumbled out of the granary before a massive wooden beam collapsed with a deafening crash behind us that Meisu was captured. Qingdai was rescued alive. But the real shock came when our men uncovered a hidden cellar beneath the granary floor. Inside lay the missing final page of the 17-year-old grain ledger, alongside a decade-long private account book belonging to the Eastern Palace. Everything began to unravel that very night. The emperor summoned the 3 highest judicial boards to convene. The Duke of Anghua was imprisoned. The Eastern Palace was placed under strict house arrest. The former Yoning Marquis estate was sealed off, its accounts ordered fully audited. My father was stripped of his noble title, pending trial. All 3 of my brothers were suspended from their official posts. That the entire capital waited to watch me fall. Gossip spread everywhere. I had dragged my whole family into ruin simply to get revenge on my adopted sister. People even gathered outside the gates of Chiuju Manor, shouting accusations that I was unfilial. For a long time, I stood by my window listening to their shouts. Qingdai asked gently, "Young miss, shall I send servants to drive those people away?" I shook my head. Let them shout. Once I was terrified of being called unfilial. That fear forced me to endure so many wrongs. But I have learned. None of these people would ever sit in prison for my sake. None would drink poison in my place. Their words carry no real weight. Qingdai smiled softly. "Young miss, you have grown so strong." "Not strong," I corrected quietly. "I died once. My skin has just grown thicker." 3 days later, the emperor summoned me to give testimony. Not in the empress's palace this time. Inside Zichen Hall. My father, the Duke of Anghua Lu Jinghang, and Meisu all stood within that chamber. My 3 brothers were also present. One by one, I laid out every piece of evidence. My mother's handwritten letter, the complete grain transport ledgers, the broken bronze token, and the private account books that the Duke of Anghua stubbornly refused to confess. That was until Aunt Ju was brought forward to testify. She told the court the woman who had administered slow poison to my mother had been a medical woman sent over from the Duke's household. And more shockingly, Meisu's birth mother was still alive. She had been hidden away for years deep within the Duke's estates. When that woman was dragged into the imperial hall, Meisu's face turned chalk white. She knelt on the marble floor and confessed everything. Years before, she and her elder sister concubine Lu had plotted to swap their newborn daughter with the Marquis household's legitimate baby girl. The Duke of Anghua had saved her life long ago, and she owed him a debt of gratitude. In exchange for carrying out this plot, her own daughter would grow up in wealth and status. As for me, their original plan had been to kill me outright right after the swap. Only the servant ordered to dispose of me could not bring himself to murder an infant. He left me on the doorstep of a peasant family, and that was how I survived. When my mother uncovered their scheme, my father was first persuaded to quiet her investigation. Then the Duke's men poisoned her. Every hidden truth was laid bare for the emperor and all officials to witness. My father knelt there, head bowed, never lifting his eyes. The emperor questioned him. "Xia Chongshan, how much of this did you know?" He remained silent for a long, heavy moment. "Your Majesty, I knew half of it." "Which half?" "I knew of the grain smuggling conspiracy. I knew the Duke of Anghua was involved. I knew my wife was investigating the case. But I knew nothing of the infant swap. And I never imagined he would murder her." The emperor let out a cold, bitter laugh. "You did not know? You handed your wife's investigative findings straight over to her murderer. How is that any different from handing him the murder weapon?" My father pressed his forehead flat against the stone floor. No words to defend himself. I watched him, and I felt no rush of triumph. Only hollow emptiness. In my past life I had craved his love and approval more than anything in the world. Now he knelt before imperial judgment, and I wanted nothing from him at all. Next came Meisu's turn. She had taken part in kidnapping Qingdai, destroying evidence, and setting fire to the granary. These were crimes committed in this lifetime. She could no longer hide behind the excuse of being an accidentally swapped baby that she turned tear-stained eyes toward my father. Father, save me. For the first time, he did not rush to shield her. He simply closed his eyes as she turned to each of my brothers in turn, begging for help. Third brother looked away. Second brother clenched his fists tight. Oldest brother remained calm. You have committed wrongs. You must accept your punishment. Meisu completely broke down. You were never like this before. You promised you would always protect me. She pointed a trembling finger straight toward me. Everything changed because of her. Ever since she came back, you have all turned against me. I said nothing. Then oldest brother spoke plainly. This is not Xiang's doing. It is because we ourselves were wrong. My eyes stung. That acknowledgement had come far too late, yet it had finally arrived. Still, it could not undo the past. The sentences were handed down that the Duke of Anghua was convicted of treason, embezzlement of military grain, and the murder of a marchioness. Stripped of all rank and property, he was condemned to execution in the autumn. The crown prince was deposed, entangled within the private account book evidence. The empress lost her phoenix seal, and was confined for life within the palace. Lu Jinghang had not directly participated in the old grain conspiracy, yet he had hidden evidence for his father and forged Meisu's alibi during the kidnapping. He lost his position as ducal heir, and was exiled 3,000 li away. On the day of sentencing, he blocked my path outside the palace gates. Only months had passed, yet he looked haggard, worn down beyond recognition. Xiang. I paused. Is there something more you wish to say? He stared at me for a long time. If I had not favored Meisu back then, would things have turned out differently for us? No, I answered without hesitation. He gave a bitter smile. You will not even pause to consider it? I have already spent one whole lifetime considering that question. He could not understand, and I had no need to make him understand. Lu Jinghang, you never truly loved me. You only grew accustomed to me orbiting around you. The moment I stopped playing that role, you felt you had lost something precious. That is not love. I turned to walk away. His voice called out after me, what of Xiao Qinyang? I halted. He is nothing like you. How so? I glanced back over my shoulder. He never expected me to circle around him. With those words, I walked away and never looked back. The judgment for the former Yongning Marquis household arrived a few days later. My father was stripped of his Marquis title for shielding the grain conspiracy and misappropriating my mother's dowry. Since he had not personally participated in murder, and had later handed over important evidence, he escaped imprisonment. The noble title reverted back to the imperial court. The Marquis household ceased to exist. Oldest brother kept his official post at the judicial temple, but was demoted 2 ranks. Second brother, who had known nothing of the plots, retained his position in the imperial guard. Third brother escaped formal punishment, thanks to his act of risking his life to save us in the burning granary, and his lack of complicity in the old crimes. The most surprising decree came directly from the emperor. He awarded the original Yongning Marquis estate to me. His reasoning: half the manor's renovation costs had been covered by my mother's funds. And since the household owed me 387,000 taels with no way to pay, the estate would serve as compensation. When I heard the imperial edict read aloud, I almost laughed out loud. Months before, I had walked away from that compound. Now the very property everyone thought I could not live without belonged entirely to me. I did not move back inside its walls. I sold the estate. Half the proceeds went to my maternal grandfather. With the other half, I purchased 100 mu of land just outside the capital. I planned to build a women's academy and a free medical clinic there. Qingdai asked me softly, Young miss, do you hold any regret? I stood before the old Marquis Manor gates. Its noble plaque had already been removed. Vermilion wooden doors looked faded and worn by time. Regret over what? This place was once your home. I thought quietly for a moment. I once treated it as home. But a home is not merely a building. If the people inside will never treat you as family, no matter how grand the walls, it remains nothing more than stone and timber. My father and 3 brothers moved into a small modest courtyard in the southern part of the city. I never visited them. Not out of vengefulness. There was simply no point. Until the winter solstice that year, 4 figures appeared at the outer gate of Cheoju Manor. My father, oldest brother, second brother, and third brother. Qingdai hurried inside with a strange look on her face. Young miss, they are kneeling out in the snow. I could scarcely believe my ears. I stepped out into the courtyard. Snowflakes drifted down from the gray winter sky. The 4 of them knelt upon the cold ground. My father's hair had turned far whiter. Oldest brother still kept his neat, formal appearance. Second brother bore a fresh scar beneath one eye. Third brother looked the most disheveled, jaw set in stubborn defiance, yet he refused to rise. This scene was nothing like the dramatic, tear-filled reconciliation people might imagine. They had always known I was their blood-related daughter. They knelt now not because they had suddenly discovered that fact. They knelt because they had finally come face to face with the weight of all the harm they had done. My father spoke first, his breath fogging in the cold air. Xiang. I stood safely inside the gate. If you have things to say, father, stand and speak. He shook his head. I owe you this, kneel. And I owe it to your mother. I did not step forward to lift him up. Oldest brother began. I have gone through every incident from those 3 years after you first returned to the manor. All the cruel rumors. The broken jade bracelet. Meisu falling into the pond. The harm you suffered out on the riding grounds. We blamed you wrongly over and over. His voice grew quieter with every sentence. Second brother followed. That day on the riding grounds, I did not abandon you out of deliberate cruelty. I know. I told him. He froze in shock. You simply cared more for her than for me. Those words stung deeper than any accusation of intentional malice could have. At last, third brother forced out his apology. The time I pushed you into the pond. That memory haunts me. His face paled. I am sorry. It was the very first time he had ever uttered those 2 words to me, yet I realized I had waited far too long for these apologies. Now that I heard them, they barely stirred my heart. Father lifted his eyes toward me. Xiang, can you? He did not finish his question. Yet I knew exactly what he begged for. Forgiveness. I stayed silent for a long stretch of time. Father, I no longer hate you. A flicker of hope sparked in all 4 of their faces, then I continued. But that does not mean we can return to how things once were. Apologies may end hatred, but they cannot mend broken bonds. I will not seek revenge against you. If one day you face disaster you truly cannot overcome, and I learn of it, I might offer help. But I will never move back to live with you. I will no longer place you 3 at the center of my world. And I will not become that daughter again, endlessly waiting and craving your affection. Tears streamed down my father's face. It was the first time I had ever seen him weep. Still, I would not soften my stance. True forgiveness ought never to demand I sacrifice my own well-being all over again. Stand up, I said. The snow grows heavy. Do not kneel here any longer. Eventually they departed. A few steps away, third brother turned back. In the future, may I still come to visit you? I considered it. Send a visiting card ahead of time. He laughed, eyes glistening. I will. From then on, our relationship existed in a strange middle ground. Neither close kin, nor bitter enemies. Oldest brother would occasionally send me case documents from the judicial temple involving women's property disputes, knowing I was building a women's academy and hoped to teach girls to read contracts and understand imperial law. Second brother was dispatched to the northwest border. He sent 2 letters home, mostly describing brutal sandstorms, no sentimental words. Third brother visited most often, always remembering to send his visiting card first. The first time he arrived, Qingdai deliberately made him wait outside the gate for half an hour. He did not lose his temper once. I felt no sense that fate had finally rewarded me. Their growth and change belonged to them. My own path forward belonged only to me. The following spring, my women's academy officially opened its doors. Our very first intake had only 27 young girls. Merchants' daughters, children of disgraced officials, and 3 full orphans. I taught them to read and interpret account ledgers. Manager Gui instructed them in business operations. Aunt Ju taught etiquette and household management. My maternal grandfather brought a skilled female physician all the way from Jiangju to teach basic medical care. Some people called my academy heretical. Others quietly sent their own daughters to enroll. By the 3rd month, The emperor personally bestowed a carved stone plaque for our school, Jin Tang. Those two characters, Golden Hall. Meant to defy fate and carve your own destiny. I laughed for a long while when I read them. That phrase described me perfectly. 6 months after the academy opened, Xiao Qinyang came to propose marriage. There was no grand imperial decree, no lavish royal wedding gifts. He simply brought a jug of fine wine. We sat together in the quiet rear courtyard of Qiuju Manor. "Xiang," he said, "do you intend to marry someday?" I was busy reviewing academy accounts. That depends on the person. What makes a person suitable? I lifted my head to look straight at him. First, he will not seize control over my money and businesses. Agreed. Second, he will never interfere with the running of my women's academy. Agreed. I will not give up all my enterprises merely to be a prince consort's wife. Agreed. Every year I will travel back to Jiangju for 2 months. I will travel there with you. I laughed. Your Highness agrees far too quickly. I have spent 2 years thinking over this choice, he told me. All the conditions you just named. These are not concessions you must fight for. They are things you already possess. My heart softened. In my past life, I had foolishly believed winning meant capturing the love of a powerful, high-status man. Now I understood what drew me to Xiao Qinyang was never his royal title. It was the simple truth. He never treated my independence as a threat. He never viewed my family fortune as future dowry. He never pressured me to shrink myself small to fit beside him. I laid out one final condition: if one day I no longer wish to stay married to you, tell me honestly. He paused for a heartbeat. Then we will divorce. That simple. What would you have me do? Lock you away? I burst out laughing. He laughed alongside me. So will you marry me? I did not give an immediate answer. Instead, I poured 2 cups of wine and handed one to him. Let us try it first. He raised an eyebrow. Try what? Try whether marriage can feel more free than living alone. Xiao Qinyang clinked his wine cup against mine. That sets a high bar. Are you afraid? Not at all. I enjoy a challenge. We held our wedding ceremony in the autumn of the next year. It was not extravagant. I did not depart from the old marquis household as a bride. I walked out from Qiuju Manor. My maternal grandfather held my hand and led me to the wedding carriage. My father stood among the guests. My 3 brothers were also present. They did not rush forward to escort me. They only watched quietly from a distance. 3rd brother's eyes were red. Oldest brother handed me a box holding the final installment of the money he owed me. 2nd brother gave me a sharp short blade for self-defense. 3rd brother gifted me a gentle chestnut mare, not a famous Western war steed. Back on the riding grounds all those years ago, he said, I owed you a horse. I accepted the gifts, but I did not pretend we could return to the old days. Some relationships do not need to be repaired back to their original shape. Growing into something new is enough. After we wed, I refused to move fully into the main halls of Prince Jing's manor. Xiao Qinyang ordered a separate small courtyard built right next door, connected yet independent. Each side had its own outer gate. Whenever I wished to return to Qiuju Manor, I could leave freely. The first time I saw that separate courtyard, I teased him. Aren't you afraid people will mock us? A prince and his consort living in separate courtyards. Let them laugh. That phrase struck a familiar chord. 2 years before, I had spoken exactly those same words to Qing Dai at Qiuju Manor. I realized then, the right person will not shield you from every malicious rumor. When gossip comes, they will never force you to change yourself just to keep the peace. 3 more years slipped by. The Jintang Academy opened 4 new branches, in Jiangju, the capital, Luzhu, and Linan. I revived my mother's abandoned tea mountain plantations. The Gu family's merchant businesses expanded far to the northern territories. Some people called me mistress owner. Others called me Prince Jing's consort. I answered to both. Neither title captured the full truth of who I was. My father never remarried. He lived in that small southern city courtyard, sometimes traveling to temples outside the capital to burn incense in memory of my mother. Oldest brother was promoted to vice minister of the judicial temple. 2nd brother won military honors fighting on the northwest frontier. Third brother sold half of his horse ranch and built a sanctuary for old retired war horses. Mesu was sent into exile. She fell ill once on the long journey but survived. Later word reached me that she married an ordinary merchant on the northern border. After that, we heard nothing more of her. I sent no spies to track her fate. Her story no longer mattered to me. Lu Jingheng received a pardon after 5 years of exile. Rumor said he returned once to the capital and stood outside the Jintang Academy gates for a very long time. But I was away in Jiangju that day. I never laid eyes on him, and I never asked for further news. My maternal grandfather lived to 82 years old. One sunny afternoon, he sat in his courtyard soaking in sunlight, holding my hand. If your mother could see you now, she would be overjoyed. I asked him, do you think she would think I am too unruly? The old man laughed until he coughed. When she was young, she was far more unruly than you. I laughed alongside him. That night, I opened my mother's old letter once more. Time had yellowed the paper, yet her final line remained clear. Asterisk, if my daughter returns, I do not ask you to bring glory to the family. I only wish you to choose your own path in life. Asterisk, I stared at those words for a very long time. In my past life, I had fought desperately to reclaim what I thought was mine. I hungered for the status of marquis household legitimate daughter. I craved my father's affection, my brother's protection, and envied marriage. I believed if I took back every stolen thing one by one, my life would finally be whole. Rebirth taught me those things were never the heart of the matter. I could live without my father's love. I could let go of my brother's partiality. I could set aside the title of marquis's daughter. I could reject a marriage arranged for me by others. All those virtues the world demanded of women. Filial piety, gentleness, obedience, understanding. I could cast them aside when they hurt me. What I truly needed to take back was myself. That girl Xia Xiang, once bound hand and foot by family duty, by social custom, by betrothal promises, by public reputation. The girl who wronged would always turn inward and wonder if she had simply not tried hard enough. It took one lifetime to learn that lesson. Thank heaven I was granted a second chance to live by it. That winter, Jintang Academy welcomed a new class of students. A 14-year-old girl was dragged to our gates by her father, weeping the entire way. She told me her family had arranged a marriage for her to a man 20 years her senior. She refused it, yet her father insisted this was her destined fate. That she looked up at me through tear-filled eyes. Madam, can fate truly not be changed? I looked at her. Long ago, so many people had told me the same thing. You are a marquis's daughter, so you must consider the greater good. You are a Lin family child, so you must be understanding to your father. You are the elder sister, so you must yield to your younger sister. You are a betrothed young lady, so you must trust your fiancé. You are a woman, so you must endure. Everyone called that my fate. But dying once opened my eyes. Fate is not a scrap of paper forced into your hands. It is not a name written in a clan registry. Not a red stamp pressed onto a marriage contract. Not words spoken in an imperial edict. And most certainly not the choice made for you by some man or some clan. I knelt down and brushed the tears from the young girl's cheeks. It can be changed. She stared in shock. How? I smiled gently. First, learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Snow drifted down outside the window. On the other side of the courtyard, Xiao Chenyang was surrounded by a crowd of young male students, answering their questions about military strategy. Qingdai hurried along the corridor, her arms full of ledgers, and caught sight of me. Boss, she called out. A letter has arrived from Jiangju. In the distance came the clink of horse bridles. Likely third brother had shown up again without sending his visiting card ahead. And the gatekeeper was holding him outside. I rose and walked out into the corridor. The wind stirred the small copper bell hanging from the eaves. Its tone was crisp and clear. I remembered that fateful night long ago. The false daughter's name had been carved into the clan registry. Everyone expected me to weep, to throw tantrums, to fight and beg for what was mine. Instead, I packed 2 trunks and walked out of the Marquis Manor that very night. Back then my father and my 3 brothers all believed I would eventually come crawling back. They thought I could not survive without their household. Later they knelt before me, but I never returned to them because from the moment I stepped through that side gate, my destiny no longer lay trapped within those high manor walls. This time, I refused to walk down the path other people had carved out for me. I walked my own road. And the further I traveled, the brighter the world stretched out ahead.